blocks for good automatic number conversion. Let me show you. This will help you to see why you'll want to remove old dictionary entries like $25,000 in order to obtain good automatic number conversion with Total Eclipse. I'll write a large number that contains $25,000. 7,025,000 and 6 cents. You may have noticed that when I wrote 7 trillion, it displayed in red because the number conversion was pending. As soon as I wrote $25,000, the number conversion ended and this figure translated. The number conversion began again when I wrote 6 and ended when I wrote the period. Now let me delete this entry and use the same steno to write this number one more time. It's in the color of pending translation display until I write my period, and now this large number translates perfectly. In fact, Eclipse does not need a large number of dictionary entries to serve as building blocks for good number translation. Your dictionary should contain entries for 100, 1,000, million, billion, and trillion, and each of these should be defined as words, not zeros with commas. Likewise, you'll have entries for dollars and cents, and each of these will be defined as words, not symbols. And the same would apply to any other currencies for the country in which you happen to be working. There's no need for multi-stroke entries for things like $100, as long as you have building block entries for $100 and the like. However, if you have a one-stroke steno method for writing $100, then that should be in your dictionary, defined in words, rather than a dollar symbol with zeros. You would do the same thing for other one-stroke methods of writing things like $1,000, $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion. What about written numbers? You probably use word strokes for numbers like 1 through 10. And if you don't use the number bar at all, then you will create 99 entries defined as 1 through 99, each one defined as words, not digits. Your dictionary does not need to contain entries for things that you write with the number bar and no extra letters. You could delete such things, but they're harmless. However, if you use the number bar along with an extra letter for things like 1E to mean 11 or 12E meaning 21, then entries like these do need to be defined in your dictionary. With these building blocks in place, you would actually remove items like $100, $1,000, because as we saw earlier in the example of $25,000, these entries are not helpful. It's because they don't describe a number. Instead, they're just characters that are only useful if you're writing one specific number, and thus they do not function as building blocks to help Eclipse understand a great variety of other numbers that you might be trying to write. Remove these old entries because building block entries such as the ones we've described here are much more versatile and much more powerful.
Understand what it's saying there? That you always want to write it out. Because if not, then it's always going to put it as that number. So it's not going to know if you put the $1,000.04, it's not going to know to put it together. But if you put it as words, then it knows how to put it together. Does that make sense to you guys? Y'all want to watch it again?
No. No, it's everybody else does.
You do? Okay.
No.
Be careful what you say, because once it turns on, I won't turn it off.
Before we begin to clean up your dictionary to remove old unnecessary number entries, let's make sure that we create a dictionary and user settings backup. In fact, this should be a part of your producing every job. Don't consider any job complete until you've made a backup of your dictionary and user settings. Too many reporters forget to do this and only think about it when their computer crashes. Then they discover that their last backup is from long ago. The process is really quite simple. You'll go to the Tools menu and select Backup. And then you can back up to either an external disk or a folder on your hard drive. Let's see this in action. I'll go to the Tools menu to select Backup. The main dictionary and user settings appear highlighted on this dialog, which should indicate how important they are. Next, I'll select the user settings that I want to back up. If you do not select anything at this screen, then you're not backing up user settings. You can either use the mouse or press the space bar with the arrow key to move up and down and tag files or untag them. Next, where do I want to store the backups? I can store them on a floppy disk, in a backup directory on the hard drive, in an auxiliary directory, for instance a flash drive, or browse to any folder that I have access to. I'll select the auxiliary directory that I've indicated in my user settings. This is the flash drive that I use over and over again. If a file already exists, you'll be asked whether you want to overwrite it or not. And now the backup is complete. The Tools menu is also where you will find Restore. In this example, I'm restoring from my auxiliary directory, which is the flash drive that I have plugged into my computer. Next, I'll find the files that I want to restore. That includes my user settings and dictionary and spelling list. And when I press Finish, these files are restored, and I'm asked if I want to overwrite any file that already exists. I'll answer yes. And now the backup is complete.
Understand? So that may be the way that we need to restore those files. Because we've already backed them up onto that thumb drive and then do it kind of the same way. So we'll try that in a little bit. But I mean, that's really important too, guys. I think I told you guys my computer crashed about a month ago. A month, maybe 6 weeks ago. And it's scary. You know, because I'm doing a job that has to be turned in that night to the Court of Appeals. And I'm just about done putting my corrections in. It's about 180 something pages. On about page 20, and my computer just turns off. And I mean, I'm freaking out. You know, and I have an external hard drive, I just hadn't done it. And you always think, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I'm in too big of a hurry. You know, I'll do it tomorrow. And you finish that job, it's like, God, I'm glad just to be done with that job. You know, I don't even want to worry about it anymore. I'm done. And then you never think about backing it up. And then, you know, there you are. Next time it happens. So be careful with that.
Now let's discuss how to set up the Numbers section of your user settings. And the first question is whether you want to use number conversion or not. Now, most users would probably say, well, why wouldn't I? But some writers have done a great deal of work on their number writing theory, and they fear losing control and not getting the quality of number translation to which they're accustomed. But Eclipse number conversion can be very finely adjusted to support your writing style, and you can limit its role to offer you just as much help as you want and no more. So go ahead and put a check in the box next to number conversion, and we'll discuss how to fine-tune the user settings so that Eclipse offers you only as much help as you want. By the way, the dialog that you're seeing here illustrates options that are available on newer versions of Eclipse. So don't be alarmed if your user settings dialog is not identical to the one that I'm using for my illustrations. The next questions ask, how do you write numbers rather than how do you want them transcribed? Do you want the system to ignore written numbers?
Perhaps you use word strokes when you want written numbers like 1 through 10. Secondly, do you want the system to process and as a number? Admittedly, this is just a crutch to help if you can't avoid writing the word and when you hear it spoken as part of a number. We'll begin with this second question first because it's easier to illustrate. To support this writer, process and as a number really needs to be checked. You will find 111 items for under $25,125.50. With the number settings incorrectly adjusted, the word and translates as an ordinary word each time it is written. We'll check the box next to process and as a number, and we'll write exactly the same phrase. You will find 111 items for under $25,125.50. So here you see that the word and is being considered part of the number. As soon as I write the period, the number converts for me. If you do ask the system to process and as a number, then there will be times when you will need to know how to force a space when the word and comes at the end of a number. Let me show you. Here's how a force space stroke would be defined in your dictionary. It's a space surrounded by delete space symbols. So within a single set of braces, you would have a caret, a space, and then another caret. Let's see it used now. The first payment was for $20,005.50, and the next payments were for $5,000 for space and $120. So here I wrote the force space stroke between $5,000 and $120 because these are two separate numbers. If you're wondering why I didn't need the force space stroke after $20,005.50, it's because a number that ends with the word cents is complete. You won't have any digits after the word cents. So you could write the force space stroke, but it's just not necessary there. Likewise, you don't have to use a force space stroke if there's a comma that separates two words. So she paid $20,000, comma, and $5,125.50 remained. So a force space stroke was necessary to keep these two numbers from being seen as one. But the comma was a natural separator between $20,000 and $5,125.50. So if you're going to use process and as a number, remember that it's a crutch and it's only in the system if you can't help writing the word and when you hear it as part of a number. So you will need to know how to force a space when the word and comes right at the end of a number without the word cents or a punctuation mark as a natural separator.
Explain what he just said. Un dia. Did y'all understand that? You have to be a really good writer to do it this way. You really do, and have to understand exactly what's going on. And it's tough. It's really tough. And this is more for real-time writers. If you do it in a deposition or in court and you're writing for your judge, he's going to know exactly what's going on. If you write $25,400, it's going to go 25. Even if it writes it out 25 comma, 1,000 and $420, and it comes out $ 420, he's going to kind of know. He'll be able to work through it or whatever, but this is the way that you properly do it. Putting the spaces in there, because the and, like he said, is only a crutch. It's only a crutch, so you have to know to put the caret, comma, caret in there to know that it goes together, and so it's a little, it can get a little confusing, but this is the proper way to do it if you're going to do it that way, and if you're going to do real-time writing, or I guess like card captioning, stuff like that. So don't want to watch that again? Okay, we'll watch it one more time.
Why do you ask us then?
Ignore
I'm pretty
written
sure I
numbers is an option that exists on the numbers section of your user settings to give you more manual control over number translation. Let me show you. Let me first illustrate what would happen if this option were not correctly selected. On May 4, 4 out of 5 were purchased. There are obviously not 44 days in the month of May. I used the number bar 4 after the word May. But when I was writing 4 out of 5, I used word strokes. And that's because I intended them to be translating as written out numbers. And here is my dictionary entry for my word stroke 4. It's defined as the written out number 4. So now let's adjust my number conversion settings to give me more manual control. I'll put a check in the box next to Ignore Written Numbers. And now let's go to the part of the dialog that asks what should be written out. Since I will be using word strokes for the numbers 1 through 10, I don't need the system to write out anything for me. I'll use a word stroke where it's appropriate. And what about this option? At start. This is asking, what do I want the system to write out at the start of a sentence? And I'll go ahead and leave this set to 1 through 100. So numbers from 1 through 100 at the start of a sentence would be written out, but 101 and above would appear in digits. So now let me try writing this same sentence again, with the number settings correctly adjusted for my writing style. As I rewrite this sentence, notice how my steno strokes that are defined as written out numbers translate almost immediately. They're being totally ignored by the automatic number conversion system. They're just being seen as ordinary words. In contrast, this number, which is not in my dictionary as a written out number, is waiting to see if there is more to be converted. On May 4, 4 out of 5 were purchased. So if you already have a habit of using word strokes when you want written out numbers, but you use the number bar otherwise, then you would have your number conversion section of your user settings adjusted like this. You would have a check in the box next to Ignore Written Numbers, and where it asks what should the system write out, you would answer no values at all. You'll use a word stroke where it's appropriate. Let me add that if you don't use the number bar at all, then do not ask Eclipse to ignore written numbers, because all of your numbers will be word strokes that are defined as written out numbers. So you wouldn't want the system to ignore them. You do want Eclipse to convert your written out numbers to digits where appropriate. So this option is not for you, but it would be important for another writer. And this is just one more example of how we adjust the software to support the writer instead of requiring the writer to support the software.
You'll get that? The only thing that I kind of disagree with is at that start. I was always taught that at the beginning of a sentence, when it starts with a number, it's always written out. Always. It never starts with a number. Unless it's, well, even like on money.
How would you do that?
What's that?
The May 4 out of 5. How would you have done it?
I would have done it that way. May 4 with the number
bar?
4 out of 5, and then stroke out 2 out of 5.
But doesn't it help? I was thinking of that too. Doesn't it help if you use punctuation? Because I tried throwing as much punctuation
Yeah.
as I can. You're going to be putting that comma in on May 4,
Sure.
comma 4 out of 5.
Right.
If you have time to do it.
Yeah.
And he's putting it as you don't have time.
Okay.
May 4 out of 5. You know, and they're saying it that quick. You know, you may have time, you may not.
Okay.
So if you don't, that's why I was taught that you use both the number bar and write out the numbers. Okay? But that was the only thing that I disagree with is at the start. But I mean, you know, whoever you go to work for, they're going to kind of tell you how they want it done, you know, so, you know, they'll be proofing your stuff in the beginning, so they'll know exactly, and they'll tell you exactly how they want it done. I want to see that again.
So far, we've been asking questions about how you write numbers, but now we'll ask questions about how you want your numbers transcribed. What kind of numbers do you want translated as digits, and what kind of numbers should be written out? To be more specific, what do you want written out in general, and what do you want written out at the start of a sentence? As you can see, there are a number of choices. We'll illustrate them now. Here's a rather typical number conversion setup. Eclipse is not being asked to ignore written numbers, and quantities from 1 to 10 will be written out. So 11 and above would be in digits, but we'll explore our options. Let's tell the system not to write out anything. Let's see how that would work. I'll write it's 1, 11, 101, and 1001. And here you see that because I had told the system not to write out any values, it didn't matter that I was using a word stroke that was defined as a written out number. Each of these numbers was not written out. It was in pure digits. Now let me go to the opposite extreme and tell the system to write out all values, no matter how small or how large. It's 1, 11, 101, and 1001. In fact, this time I deliberately used the number bar, but you see that Eclipse put all of these numbers entirely in words, and that's because I said, write out all values. Of course, this is not a setting that you'll probably use, but it does illustrate the extremes. It's quite common to put 1 through 10 in words, but then shift to digits for 11 and above. But if you have other preferences, there are several choices to support them. Let's try this one. 1 through 10 in words, and then even tens in words, but other numbers in digits. It's 1, 10, 11, 20, 21, and 30. And again, I used the number bar in this example, and you see it didn't affect, in and of itself, what was going to be written out or in digits. So I hope it's clear that the question, what should be written out, doesn't ask how you are writing your numbers, but it's asking how do you want them transcribed, in digits or in words. Our examples so far have used quantity numbers, but there are separate settings for currency numbers and ordinal numbers. So if you believe that currency numbers should never be written out, you can set write out to no values. Here's an example. It's $5. But if you believe currency amounts from 1 to 10 should be written out and then begin using digits as of 11, then you could adjust your number transcription rules. It's $5. Likewise, you decide whether ordinal numbers will be written out from 1 to 10 or some other threshold, or never written out, or always written out. I'll go ahead and select write out ordinals from 1 through 10. It's the second and 22nd. By the way, the ND was placed in superscript because I chose to use the option Extra Ordinal Formatting, which is available on newer versions of Eclipse. This will affect my hard copy, but it will not appear any different on the ASCII file. The kinds of numbers you want written out at the start of a sentence may be very different from the kinds of numbers you want written out in general. So you have these same choices that can be set at the start of a sentence. So at the start of a sentence, I want quantities from 1 to 100 written out, and currency amounts from 1 to 100 written out, and ordinals from 1st through 100th written out, but 101st and above will be in digits with an ordinal ending. And each of these preferences is quite different from what I want written out in general. This is just for the start of a sentence. Clarify? It just lets you set the threshold for replacing a long series of commas and zeros with easy-to-read words that indicate an order of magnitude. So if you find 1 million easier to read than this number, then your threshold would be million. The default setting here, of course, is million. And if you raised the threshold to billion, then 5 million would translate with a lot of zeros and commas, but 5 billion would be much easier to read.
Understand that?
He answered my question.
Hmm?
He answered my question.
Yeah. So she had asked that question earlier about, what that meant. What was the ordinal,
Extraordinal.
extraordinal? That's what it is, the raised 2D. I mean ND, or whatever. So it all depends on how you want to write it. It allows you to do whatever you want, and the software will do it for you. So, any questions? Play it again.